The first Dishonored game is the kind of game that comes as close to perfect as a game can. It's a game with fundamentally zero flaws in the ideation and execution of its intended form. It is sharp, it is concise, it is mechanically satisfying, it is narratively engaging. The art direction is unique in the sort of way that all but ensures that the visuals of Dishonored will age as gracefully as any wine, and most importantly, for a story in this interactive medium, it gives genuine weight and presence to the consequences of the actions you will perform during your time in the story via the chaos system, a mechanic that operates in the background and will give you a different ending based on your actions throughout the game. It's the kind of game that leaves absolutely nothing unnecessary in the final cut, that leaves no darlings left unslain, that still somehow finds new ways to surprise me with things I discover for the first time, even on my 8th, 9th, 10th playthrough. And the thing that I think matters the most to me about Dishonored is that no matter what you do, no matter the flavor of your ending, the game insists on wrapping itself up neat, tidy, with a bow and all, thanks to a short spoken montage by the game's in-universe narrator, dictating what the next 10, 20, 100 years looks like as the nation of Dunwall and the world that surrounds it is influenced and changed by your actions in it. It is a story that fundamentally leaves no mysteries behind, a game that inherently, intrinsically, by function of its existence, does not need a sequel. It is a game that cannot be followed. Of course, I did just call it the first Dishonored game. Let's talk about that. So, the Dishonored sequel that matters today is Dishonored 2, but in classic video essay format, if we want to talk about Dishonored 2 and why it matters, we gotta talk a little more about Dishonored 1 and the legacy it established, but do not worry, I promise not to waste your time, because fun fact, this is my second version of this script, because my first one, at just over an hour, ended up being, much to my dismay, incredibly unfun to listen to. Unfortunately, it's been very long since my last video, and if I don't make those, YouTube won't give me money. Which means that I'm on a bit of a time crunch, so we'll move fast. Firstly, Dishonored 1 is a masterpiece of creative mechanical problem solving. Between the collection of supernatural powers given to that game's protagonist Corvo by an entity known as the Outsider, and the arsenal of more physics-compliant weaponry and gadgetry machined by Piero, you have access to a massive amount of problem-solving potential while never feeling like any one piece of kit is required. This game feels tailor-made for you to define your relationship with the mechanical solutions to the puzzles presented in the world design, bringing us to, secondly, the world design of Dishonored is built with a very real sandbox playground potential to it. At times, the level design of Dishonored will fully deceive you, and you will forget that you are playing a level-based endeavor. Each individual level of Dishonored is built in such a way designed to represent itself as a minor sliver of a more major open-world experience. And within each sliver are hundreds of different puzzles and problems, ranging from incredibly small to game-defining, all to solve with that aforementioned collection of powers and tools. And supporting that open-world feel, so many of these puzzles are able to be solved in so many different ways, ranging from a quiet, ghostly approach to a there's no one to notice if there's no one to notice sort of vibe, which means we should talk about, thirdly, a commentary on power, ethics, and morality. Dishonored is, at its core, a question to you, the player, about what happens when you are given unconditional, uncheckable power over the world around you and the people within it, and you are then held accountable to that power, as the game will track what you use that power to do via its in-game chaos system. Mechanically, this is just the metric by which the game assigns you a good or bad ending, but emotionally, it means far more to me than just that. I talk about this more in my first video on Dishonored. If you haven't seen it, consider it optional homework for when this video is over. Now, it's very important to note, Dishonored is more than just these elements slapped into a game and shipped off to consumers worldwide, because there is a secret fourth element to it all: balance. Dishonored is, if nothing else, a shining example of how to create an experience with nothing missing and nothing in excess. These three main elements to Dishonored create a trifecta, but because Dishonored is such a tight, clean, and concise experience, it means that all of these elements are required, in full, and with no excess, to make a game that feels and functions as a Dishonored experience. And as a result, I came into this experience with Dishonored 1 on a pedestal, as a perfect game and one that did not need expansions or sequels, and as a result, my time with Dishonored 2 began not as an exploration of what made it special or good or fun. It was me with a fine-tooth comb, looking for those three aspects, inspecting their balance, and demanding that Dishonored 2 prove it deserved to exist. And that was, with the benefit of hindsight, an incredibly foolish approach. The game opens with a long day in Dunwall, a sort of level 0 to establish who and what and where we are. To start, we will be playing as Empress Emily Kaldwin, the MacGuffin from Dishonored 1 and the child of that game's protagonist Corvo. The game introduces both you, as Emily, and the basic time frame of the setting, today being the anniversary of your mother's meeting with Clifford the Big Red Stab Wound. Here, meet your friend Captain Alexei, and also your father Corvo. What's going on with the Crown Killer murders, you ask? Great question. Why is someone going around and killing all of your political rivals? What a mystery. No time to ponder it, here comes Luca Abel, the Duke of Serkonos, bringing you a present. Surprise! The present is the villain of the game, one Delilah Copperspoon, a witch with some serious punch and an ambition for your throne, throwing you instantly into the reveal that actually, you can play this game as either Emily or Corvo, though for the purpose of this narration, we will be exploring the experience of Emily. Whichever you choose, the unlucky Unchosen will be cursed and turned to stone, a statue to decorate Delilah's stolen throne room, and the only slightly less unlucky Chosen will be locked away in Emily's quarters. Hey, I don't think we have enough going on in the intro yet. Can we arrange for Alexei to meet Clifford? Thanks. Yeah, that feels better. It's such a whirlwind of events that even having memorized basically everything in Dishonored 1, its characters and narratives, I was still left breathless and struck through with the lone thought, what the fuck just happened? And assuming you're left with a similar experience, this is the point where I admit I've tricked you slightly, in much the same way that Arcane tricked me, because Dishonored 2 is not a sequel to Dishonored. It is a sequel to the 2 DLC expansions of Dishonored. The duology of expansions that serve as the middle ground between Dishonored 1 and 2 opens with the Knife of Dunwall, a short story following Dowd, a secondary villain from the first game, and his conflict with Delilah and the Brigmore Witches, which, while enjoyed by the people who played it, only boasts 641 reviews at the time of writing. Given that the base game of Dishonored is currently sitting at just shy of 62,000 reviews, we can say that barely 1 in 100 Dishonored enjoyers played the first DLC for the game, and even less played the second. And Arcane Studios said, fuck it, we ball, run it again. God, this game is brave, and the truth is, I love this. Because so few people would have played the DLCs, myself included, it means that I have exactly as much information about Delilah as Emily does. And as a note, I love when this happens in games, when my character has exactly as much knowledge about the world or an event or character as I would get to have. Anyways, this whole coup thing is probably going to get way worse for us quickly, so we should try and move quicker. That said, I do want to linger in this space for a moment, because in true Dishonored fashion, there's kind of a lot to talk about already. Firstly, there's no objective here. You'll get a small pop-up at the start, placing your objective as escape this room, but you won't see a waypoint or an objective marker or anything else that would indicate what you're supposed to do. And this is because Dishonored, as a brand, is built around the idea that you as the player are expected to pay attention to the world around you and problem solve on your own with the tools that you have. And so the fact that this game opens with nothing is such a great indicator not just of what this game will be, but that it understands the legacy that it is following. Secondly, scattered around the room are notes and letters. Now, these are not required reading, but that does not mean they are not important. Again, Dishonored expects you to be paying attention to the world, and these notes will sometimes contain answers to puzzles, lore about the world, or sometimes both. As an example, one letter in this room is about pirates disrupting trade coming in from the south, and another letter from Emily's advisor Lenora asks if Emily is totally sure that there's nothing she wants to tell her advisors about all of these crown killer murders. It sure is strange how all of the people who speak out against Emily get butchered in their homes, isn't it? Thirdly, there is a bit of gentle instruction via example going on here. You see, the only door is locked, but there is a window that's open. Approaching the window will show you that you can climb through the window, but there's a massive pipe blocking any further progress. Go back inside to see that there are more windows, these being on the other side of the pipe, and put together that all you need to do is open one of these windows and you're home free. Captain Alexei still has a few seconds left by the time we reach her, and she'll give you the rest of this level's objectives. Inside the royal safe room, there is a secret passage that can get you out of the tower and down to the streets, where you can make your way to the docks to meet up with a ship captain who is seeking an audience with you. Hopefully, they can help you flee the city. But to enter the safe room, you'll need the key to the safe room, your signet ring, which you'll need to reclaim from Captain Ramsey, and this comes with our first choice. In Dishonored 1, the big choice for every level was between a non-lethal or a lethal approach to your assassination targets for each level, and Dishonored 2 works much the same. You may reclaim the ring by killing Ramsey, or you may reclaim the ring by incapacitating Ramsey and leaving him locked in your safe room. Now, in Dishonored 1, the non-lethal options were not to be confused with merciful options. In fact, there's a strong argument to be made that simply killing your target was a greater mercy. If left alive, the Pendleton twins get sent off to their own silver mines, heads shaved, tongues severed. The guilty Lady Boyle is sent away to the control of her stalker. The High Overseer is exiled, only to be infected with the rat plague. You get the vibe. In essence, each non-lethal option is more or less built around being a long-term punishment, but in Dishonored 2, it's not quite that simple, and we'll talk about it later after we've seen our options with all of our villains. Here with Ramsey, you can either kill him or leave him locked in your safe room. But, similar to Dishonored 1, this does not mean he is spared. Upon a later return to the tower, you can find him turned to stone as well, a punishment for his failure to contain you. Either way, reclaim the ring, flee the tower, and make your way to the streets. It's a short walk to the docks, made difficult by the traders filling the streets, but even with that short walk, there is still a lot to see here. This is that open-world vibe that Dishonored levels are built with. There's this sense of density that comes with each level, and a sort of interconnectedness with both itself, and in the case of Dishonored 2, its progenitor game. One of the earliest examples of this is the home of Dr. Galvani, a name that enjoyers of the first Dishonored game will perhaps recognize. His is a home that can be robbed, though Galvani himself is nowhere to be found. It's a neat callback to the previous game, it's a fun way to get some good loot early, and it's also a neat narrative whole, as if you rob the house and return to the house in a later level, you can attempt to rob the house again, only to find a note left over, cursing whoever robbed him the first time. Secondly, you can also find the home of the Dunwall Courier, a newspaper service, and if you make your way to the top floor, you can find the head writer being accosted by one of the trader guard. He says that he plans to stay right there and keep writing, and sure enough, when you come back to Dunwall in the final level, you can find him again secured in his office, having managed to weather the storm that came with Delilah's ruining of the city. World design aside, we also need to talk about these guys patrolling the streets real quick. You see, the soldiers and guards who acted as an antagonistic force against you during your time in Dishonored 1 had a certain level of complexity to them. Because of the nature of the story of Dishonored 1, it was able to litter its levels with NPCs that, while hostile and antagonistic to you, are not intrinsically deserving of either the natural or supernatural wrath that Corvo is capable of delivering upon them. Due to the nature of the game's story, that being that a coup has taken place, and the true nature of that event being a tightly held secret, these soldiers are victims, same as you. Perhaps to a lower caliber, but they have been betrayed and deceived in turn. But here, in Dishonored 2, one of the first things you are likely to overhear is a sergeant talking to a handful of men, explaining that Ramsey is either dead or missing, you've escaped, and that they, as a collective, are with the Duke, sink or swim, meaning, by natural extension, they're knowingly on the side of Delilah. These men have not been deceived, they are guilty. Nonetheless, if you kill them all, the game will still give you high chaos. This is a design call that gave me a level of uncertainty for the whole of the game, and it's an element we'll talk about in full in a little while. Just hold on to the thought. Making your eventual way to the docks will lead you to a lone ship in the harbor, the Dreadful Whale, and its lone sailor, one Megan Foster. She's come to tell you that danger is inbound to Dunwall, unfortunately arriving just a little too late. Still, she's able to help us flee the capital and take us to the city of Serkonos far to the south, where all of this mess seems to have started. If we can get there, it's possible that we can start putting together a response. And far from home, alone, the night before making landfall on the distant shores of Serkonos, who should choose to visit you in your dreams but the outsider, back again? To Emily, he is the confirmation of the rumors about her father. To Corvo, he's perhaps an old friend. Either way, the Outsider will offer you powers, much in the same vein as Delilah's, and these are the mechanics by which the playground effect of Dishonored 2's design comes to fruition. What I find especially cool is that if you happen to be playing through Dishonored 2 as Corvo, you'll be re-granted access to, essentially, the exact same power set you enjoyed during the first Dishonored game. But if you happen to be playing as Emily, you'll be granted an entirely different set of powers. And this is so cool because it means a few different things. The only power that the two of them share is dark vision, which means that Arcane made the call to nearly double the amount of total active powers present in the game. That alone is very fun, especially given the fact that they could have just mixed up Corvo's powers a little from the first game and then offered the same set to both characters, or not even had two playable characters. This duology of power sets is not required. I'm not sure if anyone would have missed it if it were not there. I certainly wouldn't have thought to wish for multiple elements of Emily's power set, but I'm at a point where I don't know how I'd even want to play the game without access to Domino. And what's really cool about this is that if you beat the game and go to New Game Plus, you get access to both sets of power on a single character. I shouldn't even need to explain what that means for the playground. But there is a lore aspect to this as well that I've only now come to appreciate, with Emily having a separate set of powers from her father. Corvo, Emily, and Delilah all carry the mark of the Outsider, but they all possess different powers. What this implies to me is the potential that the Outsider is not giving the powers exactly, but rather, the mark is simply a tool by which the receiver is able to access some latent pool of potential within them. Literally, the powers presented by each of the marked are simply representations of their latent selves. And what's even more fascinating about this is that both Emily and Corvo have access to a similar amount of lethal and non-lethal abilities, though you're not likely to fully unlock all of your potential in a single playthrough, meaning that you will have to choose what you value. And I think you could read that as a sort of statement about power as a thing neither inherently good or evil, but very literally defined by what you make of it. Power is not a corruptor, it is an accentuator. And these powers are cool, but they're not the only thing here to claim. Also making its return from Dishonored 1 is the heart of Jessamine Caldwin, half flesh, half machine, with the spirit of its namesake contained within. Just as with Dishonored 1, the heart of your mother will both guide you to runes and bone charms, artifacts of black magic able to enhance your powers, and also tell you secrets of the world and the people within when called upon to do so. It's a lot to take in, going into the first level. But with that foundation set, I think we can cover each level, one at a time, discussing the most important elements of each. The first level proper is Edge of the World, as we land upon the docks of Karnaca, the southernmost port of Serkonos. The purpose of this mission is to gain access to the Addermire Institute. Megan has caught word that whoever is behind the Crown Killer murders was a patient of Dr. Hypatia, the head of the Institute, so getting into the now locked-down hospital gives us our first two major objectives. Firstly, we need to put down the Crown Killer, but secondly, we need to rescue one Anton Sokolov. Sokolov is an old friend to both Emily and Corvo, but also Foster. As the pair was investigating rumors of troubles that led to Delilah's coup, Sokolov was stolen by the Crown Killer, so if we can get into Addermire, there's a chance we can kill two birds with one stone. For any promises made or delivered by the game thus far, it was the shores of Karnaca that affirmed the design of the world for me. And at first glance, the docks might not look like much, but what they represent from the perspective of Dishonored is a total commitment to the idea presented by the first game. You like that Dishonored feels like a proper living world? You haven't seen anything yet. Just like with the mechanics of your abilities and tools, the world and level design of Dishonored 2 has given me everything I could ever want, even though I'd never have known to ask for it. And unlike the Boyle Estate, one of the more standout levels from the first game, in regards to the feeling of the world being genuine and alive, these docks are not special. They're not stand out to the larger whole of Serkonos. Simply put, the entire design of Dishonored 2's overworld populace makes that original Dishonored's design look primitive by compare. And of course, all the things that mattered to Dishonored in regards to its design are still present. The base element, that expectation that you be actively engaged in the world, that you are paying attention to the spaces around you, that you are rewarded for doing so, are still present as there is so much to discover off the beaten path here. This continues as Megan Foster advises that we be on the lookout for a black market, a locale where we can purchase upgrades to our physical gear. This will be our replacement for Piero, and while I will miss him, and the ease of use that came with having the guy that we buy all of our stuff from living right next door, I do think that the black markets were a more engaging design call. Remember, so much of the design philosophy of Dishonored comes with the expectation that you will be spending time paying attention to and exploring the world, and one of the things you can find via your time spent exploring the world are these blueprints, each of which will unlock some new piece of tech or an upgrade to your existing gear whenever you next visit a black market. But black markets are their own little game of hide and seek, as they mostly exist away from your objectives, away from the common eye. You will have to search for them specifically, meaning that the blueprint and black market duology is, literally, proof that to engage with the mechanics of the game, you are expected to pay attention to the world of the game. The value of proper and patient exploration goes further than just gear, however. Behind the black market, you can find Mindy, who will offer you the ability to access a restricted route on your way to Addermire if you're able to complete a little task for her. All you need to do is sneak your way into a nearby overseer outpost and abscond with the body of one of Mindy's late associates, and in return, she'll send for someone to turn off power to the local carriage station so you can stalk your way across the tracks, bypassing a nearby guard station. It's a cool little element, but in true Dishonored fashion, the real value of this encounter is spread out across the game in little bits of lore, as you can find notes between Mindy and this person from before they were corpseified. Meaning, this body was a real person who existed in the world as truly as you do, and that's not required. Most people would probably miss that. But it's that sense of attention to the finer, smaller details that makes a Dishonored world feel like a Dishonored world. Once you're finished exploring the docks, and there is a lot to explore, you can finish the level by taking a carriage car to Addermire and beginning the next level. From a design perspective, Addermire is a much simpler structure. From a narrative perspective, oh boy, this is a particularly special experience. Addermire used to be a prestigious medical institution helmed by the respected Dr. Hypatia. Hypatia put incredible work into developing treatment for the miners of Karnaca, whose main value to the Empire is silver. But in recent days, the hospital has been closed and Hypatia has been locked away, which makes sense if the Crown Killer is being kept here between assignments. Delilah and her crew wouldn't want to risk someone seeing something they shouldn't, and there's plenty of evidence that the Crown Killer is here in Addermire. The woman of the hour is Hypatia herself, who can be found in her lab, though she is addled, unfocused, and largely unhelpful. Snoop around enough and you can secure some information on where Sokolov is being kept. Snoop around more and you might encounter an injured man, Vasco, who will identify himself as Hypatia's assistant. This is one of the ways that you can discover that Hypatia is not treating the Crown Killer, she is the Crown Killer, forced into killings as a silent passenger in her own body under the effect of a serum that she's been forced to take. Vasco will beg you to use the recipe for the counter serum he has locked away in his safe to cure her, and just as he does so, the Crown Killer makes her appearance. And this reveal is, potentially, the best material ever put into Dishonored. Literally, every single target up to Hypatia, be it Dishonored 1 or 2, has been unequivocally guilty of terrible things, and undeserving of punishment. But Hypatia is a good person, forced into a terrible life that she would never have chosen for herself, takes no enjoyment in, and if she could be freed from that life, could likely do incredible things for the world again. But it would be so much easier to just kill her here. Sneaking around Addermire, finding the code to the safe, getting the serum and administering it to her is just such a greater hassle, but Hypatia is the lone target who genuinely could never deserve to die. And the fact that they've placed Hypatia so early on in the game seemed to me to be an indicator that the targets of this game were not going to be so simple to deal with. And you'll never hear me complain about a Dishonored experience increasing the complexity of the morality of my actions. Should you make the choice to spare and cure Hypatia, she'll also bring with her one of my favorite elements to Dishonored 2, herself. If you keep her alive, she will, for a time, join you on the Dreadful Whale. And her presence doesn't exactly change anything grand. She'll bring a crate of potions, later leaving you a blueprint when she departs, but knowing that Dishonored is an experience where my actions matter, getting to see an immediate result of that action feels good in a way that most other games just can't deliver. Knowing that this woman, who is both capable of and planning to do good things for decent people, is alive by my hand is worth all of the effort of saving her and more. With information on Sokolov secured, it's time to plan a heist. Our man is being held inside the Jindosh Manor, owned by one Kirin Jindosh, a scientist of sorts behind the creation of the Clockwork Soldiers, the mechanical killers from the start of the game. He's got the basic formula for them down, but he needs the help of Sokolov, one of the greatest minds of any age Dunwall has seen, to bring them to mass production. A form of assistance that Sokolov is not exactly keen to provide. I'm going to be honest with you, I can't really tell you about Jindosh Manor in full. The Manor, with its moving walls and multiple floors, with its hidden internal spots, it's a level that resists verbal explanation, but rather demands to be physically experienced to be understood. I am confident that I have still missed so many things in this location, despite 4 playthroughs under my belt. When I talk about the world design of Dishonored as a dense affair, this is what I mean. There is a richness to the manor, more detail and potential packed into this one sliver of this one level than I've seen in some proper open world games before. Jindosh is a curious case, as far as men go. While the manor that bears his name may be complex and intimidating, Jindosh himself is anything but. One of the charms of the level is that Jindosh, after detecting that you're in his home, will begin trying to taunt you over a loudspeaker system, which is not very effective, and after getting a feel for the manor, always feels a little bit like a nice opinion, Jindosh, unfortunately for you, I am inside your walls kind of vibe. He postures bold, but that's not going to help him when it really matters. If you don't feel like getting your hands dirty, there is a machine in his lab designed to make people fucking stupid. This machine was intended to be a threat to Sokolov, to force him to help Jindosh with the Clockwork Soldiers, lest Sokolov experience stupefaction, but as it turns out, the seat for the machine fits Jindosh too. I'm gonna be honest with you, the game mostly treats Jindosh himself as a punching bag. There's even a unique animation where you can quite literally bust his balls. The man doesn't matter, the mansion does. The mechanical function of this location is nothing short of brilliance, and the ability to showcase it in a way that feels so coherent to the player is the definition of mastery of one's art. Seriously, if you take anything away from this video, it's that I am begging you to try this game just to play the Manor. All of that said, my favorite part of this level, the best attention to detail that the level shows, isn't even in the Manor. You see, the Manor is on a hilltop, and the main expected path you take to get there is via a carriage car, with the benefit that once you rescue an unresponsive Sokolov, you will automatically place him in said car to keep him safe in case you need to go back into the Manor. But you don't have to take the carriage line up. There is a footpath. If you take this path, however, you will still place Sokolov into a carriage car upon your exodus from the Manor. Now, this might be seen as an oversight, especially if you kill Jindosh first and then rescue Sokolov, as you never have any reason to get back out of the cart, but if you just happen to, or simply achieve the objectives in reverse order, you'll learn that this cart is here because this NPC has been spawned in to explain that he and their boss have just arrived to the Manor using said cart. When I say that Dishonored by nature is a remarkably clean experience, this is what I am talking about. No one would question if the cart was just there. It doesn't really matter. It isn't important to the larger overall mechanical or narrative experience, but Arcane still covered their tracks anyways, created a whole NPC, coded it all into the game just to explain why something that no one would ever question happened. The level is just so good. So much attention to detail, so much creativity on display. I'd even go so far as to call it the game's standout level if I didn't know what was coming later. With Sokolov secured and Jindosh taken out of play, we come to the Royal Conservatory and a new antagonistic force. The Conservatory is a remarkably short level, perhaps, now that I think about it, the shortest, and that's fine because I want to use it to continue that thought from earlier with the traitorous guards. The Conservatory is home to, seemingly, a bulk of Delilah's forces in the form of a witch coven headed up by Delilah's number 2, a woman named Brianna Ashworth. Now, Ashworth and co. setting up in the Conservatory is bad enough because it means the museum is closed and I really wanted to see it while I was in town, but worse still, the Coven is using a machine within the Conservatory, the Oraculum, to influence the Overseers, who we should talk about really quick. In Dishonored 1, the Overseers were a religious order based around adherence to the 7 scriptures and the repression of the outsider and his dark magic. Their practice very much came with the "it doesn't matter if a handful of innocents die if we get someone who's guilty out of it" sort of attitude, and in general, I feel like they were portrayed as a bunch of incompetent, paranoid weirdos. And then Dishonored 2 asked, yeah, but what if they were right? Because, after all, Delilah and her coven, witches using magic from the Void and the Outsider, did in fact storm the capital, slaughter the populace, and oust the Empress. More than that, though, the presence of the Coven here at the Conservatory means that the oracular order, the, handful of mummified women that the Overseers receive divine instruction from, are also compromised, leading to further unrest and instability across the Empire. There's writings from the Overseers that can be found detailing the process by which they discern the information that the oracular order passes along, meaning that if the Coven can manipulate the order, they can manipulate the Overseers as well, so naturally, the Coven's gotta go. The actual process by which you deal with them is pretty simple. You can kill them all, including Ashworth, or you can use the Oraculum to sever the connection between Ashworth and, by extension, the Coven and the Void. Essentially, you can just remove their power. But again, like with the soldiers around the world, it feels like morally, these witches, for their part in Delilah's scheme and slaughter, don't deserve a merciful outcome. And the truth is, you could probably kill every witch in this level, or every soldier in that intro level, maybe even all of them across both levels, and if you kept your hands clean otherwise, still claim a low chaos ending. But here's the thing to think about. All the problems of Delilah's coup began with the rumors that Emily Caldwin was behind the brutal killings and assassinations of the people who spoke poorly of her. And while we know that Emily and Corvo were not in fact behind the Crown Killer murders, the question is, would you have been? Would the people of Dunwall have been living in a world where the only line between life and death is your opinion of them? Or would it be better to simply recognize that the ways of Delilah and her coven and the Duke and his men are simply beneath you? It is, perhaps, not the most persuasive argument for peace, but I think the question of, am I the monster that Delilah tried to paint me as, is a thing worth considering during your adventure. Regardless, with Brianna out of the picture and valuable information claimed about the origin of Delilah's movement, it's time for us to head to the Dust District and the home of Aramis Stilton. Level 5, the Dust District, bleeds into Level 6, a crack in the slab, in the same way that the Docks of Serkonos bleeds into the Addermire Institute, with a unique type of pacing. You see, basically all of Level 5 can be skipped if you know what to look for or happen to enjoy riddles, because the only thing blocking your access to Stilton's Manor is the spooky door, secured against entry by a mechanism and lock designed by, you'll never guess, Kiran Jindosh. All that to say, I don't think you should try to skip the entire level. The main plot of the Dust District is that the local Overseer branch, led by Vice Overseer Byron, is tied up in, essentially, a gang war with a group called the Howlers, led by a man named Paolo. This is going to be an area where you get to have significant sway over the world around you, as the two groups have essentially fought to a perfect standstill, meaning that you have the chance to finally decide the conflict for good. By delivering the body of one of the group's leaders to the other, you can request they help you gain access to Stilton's Manor. Alternatively, if you happen to sleuth around the district enough, you can find a non-lethal way of removing both Paolo and Byron from the game, leaving the district to fall under the control of a person who is still to be decided. This option comes with the delightfully fun, albeit unintended feeling side effect that you can use both leaders' bodies as social skeleton keys to walk the entire level free of danger, provided you switch out which corpse or unconscious body you're carrying as you switch territories. Snoop around all you want, there's a lot of fun to be had here, little things to find, like more of the connection between Mindy and her corpse from earlier. Whenever you're ready, crack the code, open the lock, and enter Stilton's Manor. 3 years ago, Delilah Copperspoon returned from the dead. Why was she dead? DLC story stuff, who knows. She returned thanks to a ritual performed by the living, her first devotees at the home of Aramis Stilton. Now, Stilton himself was not a follower of Delilah's, and in fact, by all accounts, he was a shining example of a good man, having made his fortune working all the way up from swinging a pickaxe in the silver mines of Karnaca to operating and running those mines himself, all while never forgetting where he came from or the struggles that people in the mines still face. Despite this success, Aramis still had the misfortune of living underneath the Duke of Serkonos, one Luca Abel, who you will perhaps remember from the start of this whole mess. That power dynamic meant that when the Duke asked if he could use Stilton's house as part of a ceremony, it wasn't really a request. Stilton seems to have been dragged into the revival of Delilah, not knowing the full extent of what he was to experience, and being unprepared for it, the shock of what he saw drove him to insanity. Which is why, years later, when we break into a decrepit and run-down Stilton Manor, we can still find him there, alone, himself broken and worn alongside his home, never having really left that night. And who else should await us there but the Outsider? Being of the Void himself, the Outsider is able to offer us both an insight into the events of Delilah's revival and the chance to see it for ourselves via the timepiece. What the timepiece does is allow you to travel back and forth through time between modern-day Stilton's Manor and the night of Delilah's revival. And while that is cool, while that lets us solve the main mystery of the plot, what I really find so fascinating is that this means that there are two different versions of Stilton's Manor. One past, one present. During the course of the level, you're tasked with sneaking into Stilton's back garden and sneaking a peek at the code to his study where the revival is to take place. Doing so will let you watch Delilah's return, learning that she is immortal for so long as her soul remains separated from her form, locked away in her phylactery. And it's a good level, you know? From a mechanical and design perspective, it is cool to get to experience two versions of the same locale at the same time as part of a single level. Is what I thought, until I came back to Stilton's place on a high chaos run. In this run, Stilton never made it to the ceremony because he never left his back garden. And after grabbing the code to the study and slipping back to the future, I was greeted with a new manor. An old and run-down manor, now with a new name, with flyers declaring that the location had been put up for sale. Which, yeah, it's not Stilton's Manor anymore because Stilton was mysteriously assassinated 3 years ago. There are 3 different versions of the same level, and that third version exists as a contingency on the off chance that you happen to kill Stilton, an action that is not required, one the game never advises or recommends you do, but they made an entirely new third version of the level anyways, just in case. So naturally, you might wonder, what happens if you don't kill Stilton, but he still doesn't make it to the ritual? Because you can just knock him out for no reason. Well, if you do that, Emily will quietly mention that this is for his own good, as he won't have to bear witness to the horrors of the void, and when you slip back to the present, you'll encounter a 4th fucking mansion. He just lives there still. It's just his house now. You've saved a decent man from a terrible fate, and this is just where he lives. 4 versions. There are 4 versions of the same level, just in case you happen to interact with the world and the game in ways you weren't directed to but thought to do anyways. I mean, I praise Dishonored 1 for giving me a few change up to the streets of Dunwall. I can't even express how powerful an aspect of game design it is to drop 4 different versions of the same level, and then also include how the shifting of fate affects the manor, its owner, and the world around it all, even in unpredictable ways. Notice how if Stilton is kept sane and alive, he will later join your cause, and Megan will suddenly have both arms and both eyes, whereas before she was missing one of each. It's just so good, you guys. This whole game is just beyond anything I could have ever asked for. With the knowledge of Delilah's phylactery secured, there is only one place it could be kept: the home of her greatest admirer and her biggest simp, the Duke of Serkonos himself, Luca Abel. The premise here is simple: remove the Duke from power and secure Delilah's soul. The twist here is that the Duke has a body double, a very good one, in fact, with the only difference being that the body double happens to be a smoker. And while you could just kill the Duke, there's a fun little prank you can pull on him instead, where you incapacitate him, give his badge of office to his double, and simply present the Duke as the body double, having lost his mind and falsely believing that he is the Duke. This is absolutely my favorite single thing in a Dishonored game. It is simple, it is funny, and it works a treat because the body double, as it turns out, is a pretty upstanding guy, roped into a bad gig by nature of his appearance alone. Give him the chance, and he's happy to be a better man than the Duke was. The more important element, of course, is the claiming of Delilah's soul, which on a normal day would present a problem, as souls typically need to go into bodies, and wouldn't you know it, my body is currently chock full of my own soul. If only we had a container for a soul that we could trap Delilah's spirit in. Oh, wait. It is at this point that we must address the heart. For 15 years, the soul of Jessamine Caldwin, the mother of Emily, has resided in this vessel, and during the time that Emily has carried her, she has watched you as you've grown on this journey, a privilege long denied to this mother, having passed 15 years ago. And during your adventure, she'll speak to you, if you care to listen, of the world and its people, and of yourself. And in low chaos, that will all culminate in this final goodbye, as her soul departs the heart to make room for a captured Delilah. In her final words to her daughter, she affirms how proud she is of us, that the world is better for us having impacted it, and that as Jessamine Caldwin, a decade and a half after her death, finally slips into oblivion, her last thought is of how much she loves you. In high chaos, things are not quite so sentimental, as Jessamine demands you release her, having been shown far too much of the horrors of this world by your hand and your deeds. Having been shown that Emily has lost sight, or never even seen, perhaps, all of the good that Jessamine once fought for. A mother who loves you but cannot stand to see you any longer. And maybe it won't matter to you, that the last understanding your mother could ever have of you would be to recognize you as a monster. But I would be lying to say that the thought doesn't upset me. Either way, it's time to let her go. And in her stead, we claim the soul of Delilah, which means there's only one place left to go. Home. Throughout the game, as we explore the world, read notes and letters, and listen to the people of the Empire, and most importantly, listen to Emily as she grows during her time away from Dunwall, it will be established that Emily was not exactly a good empress. She didn't take her station seriously, and while that alone never actively hurt the people of Dunwall, it did make it very easy for the seeds of dissent to be sown. So while Delilah's coup is not Emily's fault, it was Emily's attitude towards her responsibilities that made it very easy to convince people to switch sides. And one of the greatest things about Emily being voiced in Dishonored 2 is the ability to recognize how she grows as a person and an empress as a result of your actions during the game. In low chaos, Empress Emily Caldwin the Just comes to recognize that it was her inaction, her disregard for her role, that has enabled Delilah to hurt so many people. And as she fights to right the wrongs that she allowed to come to pass, you will listen as Emily grows to truly understand the weight of her existence. Heavy is the head. In this final level, as you land on the shores you once fled, having reclaimed Delilah's soul, she will taunt you. But Emily is unfazed. She has learned, she says, that her birthright alone was never enough to claim the power that came with her station, but rather, that power must be earned, every moment of every day, given to you freely by the people you serve. And now, as she moves to reclaim that power, her first act of service will be to end Delilah's tyranny. And in high chaos, Witch Queen Emily Caldwin, Emily the Butcher, a spoiled child, a lesser daughter of a greater name, learns nothing. This is not a story of a person learning to bear the weight of their station. This is a poorly mannered child, angry and swearing revenge because some other child took away her favorite toy. Emily lands on those same shores, certain in herself only so far as to say that you only deserve the throne if you're willing to roll out a carpet of blood before it. Emily has butchered the world, she will butcher Delilah, and she will not stop there. So I guess to the people of Dunwall, as that Emily retakes her station from Delilah, it'll be like nothing has changed at all. Because even compared to the beginning of the story, Delilah and her coven have left nothing alive on the streets of Dunwall. Little things still exist, shadows of a society that once lingered here tucked away in careful hidden places. A black market in a basement, a writer in an attic, but mostly it's just empty. It's difficult to portray how much death there has been since your exodus, even with video, because the way that the world is built, you must understand in some way that this is just a small sliver of what's happened to all of Dunwall in the time you've been away. I love this level. I don't think there's any other way to put it. Did you know that you can go to the waterlock in this level? That there's an alleyway you can duck into to trail around the main tower approach, and you can even revisit the doors to the sewers that Corvo fled Coldridge Prison into at the start of the first game? I think what matters the most to me here with this design is that Dishonored 2 quite firmly insisted on being its own game, its own world, its own story, and all of that comes with a bit of separation from what came before, but never total separation. Hints, nods, name drops, there's always something to connect Dishonored 2 to Dishonored 1, small things. Until now. There's just this incredible sense of poetry, I suppose, in this final level, as Emily, like her father 15 years ago, near to the date, clears this same courtyard, this same tower interior, this same balcony and throne room, for this same purpose: to rid the world of someone who's stolen the throne. Delilah is not remarkably special. Her arena has a gimmick to it, but with a little bit of attention to detail, that gimmick can be easily negated. And if you choose to kill her, she dies, like anyone else. But if you choose to do otherwise, Delilah acts as the capstone for an idea, a culmination of the very cool thing Dishonored 2 has been doing with its non-lethals, and how rather than punish, these options are designed to remove a target's power to effect change in the world, and thereby cause harm. Delilah is a painter, you see, and a great deal of her power is vested in the ability to use her paintings to turn her desires into reality, and her final masterpiece, assembled in the throne room of Dunwall Tower, is the extreme version of this, as she intends on using her magic and specially crafted runes to turn not just Dunwall, but all of the world into her design. But it's a fragile design, and all it would take is one extra specially crafted rune added on to change everything, and Delilah could be condemned to a perfect illusion, thinking that she was in control, that she had bent the world to her will, never knowing that none of it was real. Forever trapping her in a perfect solitary confinement, one that she would never think to leave, one where she could never hurt anyone ever again. And for a woman so driven and capable enough to come back from the dead once already, maybe that's just the better place for her. Having finished with Delilah, and having rescued our father, much as he rescued us years ago, it's time for this story to end. Of course, the story of the world continues on, and just as with Dishonored 1, our adventure concludes as the outsider narrates what the coming years look like as the world is shaped by your actions. It was good in Dishonored 1, and it's so much better still this time around. In Dishonored 1, I often found that I had to apply the chaos system and the ideas of right and wrong to things on my own at times, as only a handful of things really mattered towards getting any of the game's 3 endings. But here, in Dishonored 2, I was told that the game was watching my actions far closer than I could have ever predicted, because here, at the end of all things, there are far more factors that matter for the endings. By my count, I've been able to track down near 24 separate ending elements to this game based off of your actions. And sure, they aren't all massive changes to the world, but just the fact that they exist at all means everything to me. Because what I wanted out of this, what I needed from a Dishonored experience, more than creative mechanics, more than dense world design, was to be told that my actions really, truly mattered. That I was here, that I'd done something. And for better or worse, that's exactly what I got. I don't know if I've ever felt more foolish on the back end of an experience. To go from demanding that Dishonored 2 prove that it deserves to exist, prove the value of its existence, to worshipping that game for exceeding not just any expectations, but the thing that came before it as well. It's rare, I think, for a sequel to stick the landing this flawlessly. And I'm so glad that this one did. Oh, I was not ready for Dishonored 2 to be so good, and I'm honestly so disappointed I let this one slip by me for so long. Honestly, I can't help but feel that the 2 expansions and Death of the Outsider and all of the other extended stuff for Dishonored probably deserve the same attention. We'll see what happens. Really quick, here at the end, I need to give a special thank you to my executive funders over on Patreon. Those being Ivan Thanosi, Daddy Biscuit 22, Jordan, at whose request this video was made, Device MD, New Kind of Tired, and T.Log. These 6, plus everyone else who's ever made the call to help directly support myself and my work, are the foundation that this channel is built upon, and I could not be more grateful. If you want to help support this channel, and see your name in the credits for my videos, get access to my videos early and ad-free, then consider making the jump to Patreon and seeing if there's a tier that works for you. Thank you.